Welcome into the Pump Fake, everybody. Training camps around the NFL are opening up. What a wonderful time of the year. We got a football game in, 8 days? Hall of Fame game. So we're getting very close. Jarrett Bailey with you as always, joined as always by my illustrious good friend, Matt Verderame. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. Calling that thing a game is in 8 days is the choice. I don't know if that's a game or that's just two teams getting together to shake hands, say hi, and then watch a bunch of guys get cut, play 4 quarters. But yes, it is football, and it is on television, so that's good.
You're not gonna gamble on the Hall of Fame game?
I'm not gonna watch the Hall of Fame game.
Wow.
I don't think I've ever watched the Hall of Fame game.
Really?
Really? Maybe when I was a kid, I'd watch like a quarter of it.
Oh, it's something. That's the way I look at it.
It sure is.
Yes.
Yeah.
It certainly is. All right. So as training camps open and as preseason begins in a week, Verderame and I are going to give our dueling top 10 teams going into the year. Is there any notable omissions on yours? I feel like I have like 1 or 2 that aren't in the top 10 that you could maybe argue are. So I figured we'd start there.
I don't have Miami in there.
So, I also don't have Miami in there.
So those, I guess those would be the 3. I don't have the Jets. Maybe people think that's some big omission. The Jets can call me when they do anything.
That's fair.
Other than just lose constantly. So I don't have those teams in there.
I think that Miami's the one that would get any sort of backlash, if you will. But I mean, that's a team we talked about on your pod where it's just like I just don't view them as like a legitimate, viable threat.
I've just seen the movie. How many more times do I have to watch them not be able to win a game in weather under 75 degrees? Like how many? I mean, they never beat anybody who's good.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, that's great. You can beat New England. That's great. Like, can you? Which, by the way, sounds weird even now, even though it's been years. Like it's like New England. Like it's pretty impressive to beat New England. No, it's not. Yeah, I don't know. I looked at the Dolphins. I thought about it. I was like, I don't know. Like, does anyone really think they're going to a Super Bowl? And if you're in the top 10, you should at least have a shot at going to the Super Bowl, in my opinion. Yeah. So that's kind of my reasoning.
Yeah, they were 1-6 last year against teams with winning records. The only team that they beat last year with a winning record was Dallas,
who got smoked in the wild card round. Yeah,
exactly. So, all right. Well, my number 10 then. We'll start off. Might be a little bit low for some people. I have Baltimore at 10. I think that they've lost a ton this offseason in terms of their offensive line. A lot of guys gone. No more Patrick Queen. No more Geno Stone. Mike McDonald going to Seattle. I think that's a big loss, a bigger one than people are really discussing nationally. And then in terms of the skill position guys, it's Zay Flowers and you and I at this point. Like, I think a lot of people are going to keep drinking that Rashad Bateman Kool-Aid. And it's like, oh, this is the year. I was like, okay, dude, sure it is. Mark Andrews got hurt last year too. Bunch of running backs that are no longer there. I know that they brought in Derrick Henry, but if your plan of getting over the hump is a 30-year-old running back, I tip my cap to you and wish you well because this is not going to be enough. So they dropped down for me to 10.
Okay, I'll get them in a little bit. I have the Bills at 10. So I feel 2 ways about Buffalo, and it kind of left me leaving them where I put them. So I think they're underrated nationally.
Okay.
I think they're going to win the AFC East. I know there are a lot of people picking Miami and New York. Obviously, we just talked about Miami. The Jets, with all snark aside, I look at the Jets and I say, your quarterback's 40, coming off a torn Achilles. Mm-hmm. Tyron Smith hasn't played more than 13 games in a season in 8 years. I don't have a ton of faith in Morgan Moses playing 17 games, even though he's been very durable last year. Started to get beat up a little bit. He's 33 years old. You also have Mike Williams coming off torn ACL. Mike Williams is a good player. He's beat up all the time. He's always injured. Yeah. And I don't trust the coaching staff. So all those things combined, I'm like, look, I don't think the Jets are a bad team. Like, I think they're like an 8 to 9 win team. I don't think, I just think there's so many ifs, and every if that you have to me is another reason for me to doubt you. Whereas with the Bills, I don't love the coaching staff coming to playoffs, but they've proven they can win the regular season. I don't believe in that receiver room. I don't. I think Curtis Samuel's a nice piece. He's not a number 1 receiver. Keon Coleman maybe will be. We're going to find out. But, that's a lot to ask of a rookie. That is a lot to ask of a second-round rookie to come in and, hey, man, you're the guy. Like, Shakir is a good player. I do think Kincaid is a star.
Yeah.
But I think that offense is going to have to go a lot through Kincaid and Cook, which I think is fine. But I also think it limits the ceiling on the team a little bit. Like, it's a little bit more of like, I don't know how they're going to get explosive plays with that team. And that worries me with Allen and his proclivity to turn the ball over. Like, is it one of these things where he's like, I've got to make a play? Defensively, they lost a lot of guys. Now, I understand that some of those guys went long in the tooth. I get it. Bigger names maybe than players on the field. But, like, they didn't – because of their cap situation, they didn't really replace them. So, look, I still think they're going to win the division. I still think they're a team in the playoffs that will scare you. But I don't think they're a Super Bowl team. I think they're a team that wins like 10, maybe 11 games. Schedule's not easy either. I have them 10 to 11 wins, playoff team, but I don't think they're a Super Bowl team. I think it's possible with Allen. You can't rule it out, but I wouldn't pick them to go to Super
Bowl. I'll touch on the Bills later on because they are a little bit higher for me. So I'll rebut those come the time when I get to Buffalo. Number 9. You talked about coaching staff being a big question mark for the Jets. I think it's a big question mark for the Eagles. They're my number 9 team. Roster-wise, man, like, hey, you bring in Saquon Barkley. You got a ton of stars on both sides of the ball. I think they drafted really well. They usually do. The biggest issue for them last year, especially down the stretch, was in the secondary. Bradbury looked cooked. You draft Quentin Mitchell. You draft Cooper DeJean. They usually kill the draft, and at least on paper, it looks like they did this year too. It's just Nick Sirianni is like who he is, and I think that shine and like the goofiness. Oh, Nick Sirianni, I think that's very much worn off after losing 6 of your last 7 last year. And I think the shine of Kellen Moore is really worn off too. Leaving Dallas and going to the Chargers, everybody's like, oh man, this is going to be what saves Justin Herbert, and then he's gone after a year. Vic Fangio, I mean, you could probably say a little bit of the same about him. Didn't really work out in Miami. He was a one and done with the Dolphins. So I think there is a ton riding on this, not just for the Eagles as an organization, but for Sirianni, for Moore, for Fangio. Just a ton of guys here who have a lot to prove. And I don't know if the Eagles are maybe like a one and done in the playoffs again, or even if they get to the divisional round and just get smoked, is that a team that moves on from their head coach and tries to get a Mike Vrabel?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I'll get them in a bit. My number 9 team is the Rams. So I love the offense. I think the offense is really, really good. Like maybe a top 3 offense in football. That line is better than people realize. And that line was a disaster a couple of years ago. But like Havenstein can play at tackle. Avila came in last year as a rookie and was excellent. Now he's going to slide over to center. They bring in Jonah Jackson. I mean, that's a real line like that. And they've got Kevin Dotson. Like you're a former Pittsburgh Steeler who with Pittsburgh was nothing special, but in LA found something. So that is a really good line. You also have Kyron Williams in the backfield, Stafford throwing the ball, and you've got Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, and Tyler Higbee. I mean, that team, with McVay coaching it, they're going to put it on teams. They're going to score points. My question with the Rams is defensively, you lose Aaron Donald. I don't care what you do defensively. Like, you're not replacing Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
They brought back Darius Williams, who's a good corner, not great. That secondary, I think, is all right. I don't love it. The front 7, again, you'll lose Aaron Donald. Like, there's natural questions there. I think the Rams are absolutely a playoff team. And I think, look, if the defense is good, and they also lost Raheem Morris, by the way, I should mention. If the defense is good, they could go to a Super Bowl. If the defense is okay, they're a playoff team with some upside. If the defense is a disaster, it's a lot of high-scoring games. It's trying to win 9-10 games. But I think the upside of the Rams is something that I can get behind.
I'm a big Rams fan as well. They will be coming up for me shortly. My number 8 team, and I think that they're probably going to be – I've really been a big fan of this team over the offseason and really came to really enjoy them at the end of last year. My pick to come out of the NFC is going to be Green Bay. I love what Jordan Love showed. They've got playmakers all over the offense where it's not as if they don't have an A-plus guy. They got a lot of like B guys that really come together. Dontavian Wicks is really good. Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed. They bring over Josh Jacobs after Aaron Jones leaves from Minnesota. And defensively, Joe Barry was a disaster last year. He's no longer there. I think that is just an automatic like bump just for that. They signed Xavier McKinney to a nice deal. I don't think their defense will be anything special, but I think it will be better than what it was a year ago. I think Love could be a guy who's in contention for MVP this year. I really like what Green Bay is doing. I really love Matt LaFleur as well as the head coach. I think he proved a lot of people wrong where, there was a lot of people saying, oh, he's got Aaron Rodgers. Of course, he's going to win a lot of games. Last year was his finest job. And I think that Green Bay is going to be a team that continues being a threat in the NFC. Really enjoy what they've put together. Really enjoy watching them and seeing what they can be in 2024. So they're number 8 for me, but I think that they're a team that will quickly climb. And like I said, I think they're coming out of the NFC.
Wow. All right. So you have them 8th, but you have them going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think like right now, like roster-wise, they're not anything special defensively, but I think as the season goes on, people are going to be like, oh, okay, look at Green Bay. They're 10-3 or whatever, week 14, something of that nature.
Okay. Well, I also have them 8th.
Oh, would you look at that?
So there you go. I do not think they're going to come out of the NFC, but I think they're very good. I will be seeing them in my camp tour. In fact, they're my first stop, my camp tour next week. I am looking forward to getting up there and seeing the Packers. I agree with pretty much everything you said. Look, I think defensively they're okay. I think Rashawn Gary could have a big year. I think, a lot of it for me with them is what do you get out of that secondary? You mentioned they bring in McKinney. Jair Alexander's kind of been up and down, a lot of that because of injury. But offensively, they just got a lot of guys, and I like Jaden Reed a lot. I think he could be a number 1. I think Watson, when healthy, is talented. The problem with Watson was last year his hamstring was killing him all year long. They've got a couple tight ends, Musgrave and Kraft. And I just really believe in the coach. Like for me, a lot of this comes down to who's your coach and who's your quarterback. I mean, to me, that's it. Like, let's just, I think sometimes we overanalyze some of this stuff. Like a lot of the NFL in 2024 is who is your coach? Who is your quarterback? Can you protect that quarterback? Can you get after the other one? And if you check those
Put
4
that on a t-shirt.
That's it. Like if you do those 4 things, you can win. So I like the Packers. I think the Packers are a good team. I have them 8th. I'm right there with you.
Number 7 is where I had the Rams, so right above Green Bay. Everything that you said, I'm pretty much on board with. Losing Raheem Morris and Aaron Donald, I mean, that's really going to impact their defense. They made some free agent signings in the secondary. You mentioned Darius Williams. They also bring over Tre'Davious White. His health is always going to be a question mark. They signed Cam Curl from Washington. So we brought some different pieces over to try to strengthen that unit. But yeah, outside of that, man, I agree with everything that you said. Offensively, they are a juggernaut. Sean McVay, we're used to the Rams being this, bombs away type of team, but they were a really good power run team last year. I think they're going to really lean more into that this year as well. So offensively, I love them. And I think that McVay showed a very good ability to evolve last season. And with Matthew Stafford apparently being, all hands on deck as well, I think that they're going to be right back in the mix of those teams that can come out of the NFC. Would not shock me one bit if they do.
All right, so you and I just swapped the Rams and the Eagles because I had the Eagles 7.
Okay.
So, look, a lot of what you said, you already laid it out there. The biggest question I have with the Eagles is just Sirianni. I mean, it's just one of these deals where they just can't get back on track, and they should have fired him. And we're sitting here week 5 going, oh, my God, this is a disaster. Like, this team hates this guy. I mean, it's a real question. Like, you already read the stories coming out about, him and Hurts having to repair their relation. It's never good. It's never good when it's July and you're sitting here talking about, the coach and the quarterback, like they don't really have a good relationship. That's not great. But I put them 7 simply because that roster's in a spot where if things break right, they're easily in the conversation for the best team in football. Like that's where I have them. So I worry about losing Kelsey at center. I don't think that defense is going to be dynamite. I mean, they lost Reddick. And who the Jets apparently didn't know they had to give an extension to. They're relying a lot on rookie corners. They brought back Gardner Johnson, who in Detroit last year was kind of a guy. Is that going to change now that he's going back to Philly? Well, it's a different scheme in Philly. Mm-hmm. You're running a whole different scheme. Nolan Smith, they need him to step up and play better in his second year. So it's more of an upside pick with the Eagles than it is like I'm ultra confident in them, but because of the roster and the heights that they reached even just 2 years ago, I'll put them 7.
I would also say playing in the NFC East definitely gives them at least, a 1 to 2 win bump just because the Giants
the division sucks. Right.
Yeah.
I mean that. Right.
So number 6 for me, this is where I put the Bengals. A lot of different things going on with the Bengals this offseason. DJ Reader goes to Detroit. They replace him with Sheldon Rankins. Von Bell comes back. They signed Geno Stone. Chidobe Awuzie goes to Tennessee. And then in terms of the offense, I mean, it comes down to can Burrow stay healthy, which hopefully he can.
Right.
By the way, what would it take for you to bleach your hair like that?
There's not enough money in the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd do it again. I thought it was a good look for me. I don't know about you, but
I've never bleached my hair in my life. So
really, I feel like it's like a rite of passage for a man.
No. If I bleached my hair, my father would have shaved it off in about 5 seconds. I one time in high school, we had this. I forget if it was a contest or something, but I dyed my hair green for a day.
Okay,
which was fine. I mean, it was like it wasn't permanent; it was temporary.
Yeah.
I did it in college. I had my hair down to my shoulders one year.
Really?
Yeah. Thank God there's no photos existing of that.
Oh, that's a shame.
Well, believe it or not, now it's all shaved off, so you can never tell. But I used to have pretty thick Italian hair, and it just it started to curl up on me. It was like Barry Melrose.
And you didn't keep it?
I didn't. I cut it all off, right down to this haircut that I've kept now for the last 14 years. I hated how hot it made my head.
That's a very fair point. As somebody who permed his hair at one point and had very long hair, yeah.
It was cool until it started to curl up in the back. I was like, I'm done with this.
That's fair. All right, fair enough. Bengals. We've talked about this a few times this offseason. I think that they're going into this with like, all right, man, this is kind of our last hurrah with this current collection of guys where T. Higgins is going to be gone after this season. But as long as you have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, things are going to be, you're always going to be in the mix. Defensively, I pointed to the new guys that they have, but, Trey Hendrickson's also very good. Logan Wilson in the middle of the defense. Their secondary was probably their biggest issue last year because they were young and not consistently playing well. They, like I said, they bring back Von Bell and they add Geno Stone to a secondary that needed that veteran leadership. I think they're going to be right back in the mix of things. If Burrow stays healthy, I think they win the AFC North. I'm kind of teetering on them being my pick out of the AFC. That's kind of been where my head's been past few months. So I'd say right now, July 24th, my Super Bowl pick is Bengals Packers. But again, that rides on the health of Joe Burrow.
Yeah, they're the only team that can beat the Chiefs. They don't beat them; they're going to three-peat. I'll get to the Bengals later. I had the Ravens here. Okay. I had the Ravens at 6. As you pointed out, the Ravens lost a lot of guys, but the one thing you didn't mention about all the losses, they lost 3 fifths of their offensive line, which I don't think is somehow being talked about. Like it's just people don't think it matters. It matters a lot, especially when your left tackle is a huge injury concern every time he steps out on the field. Like there are probably, let's be real. Ronnie Stanley, God bless him, hope he plays every game. He's probably not playing every game. So there are going to be some games in there where Linderbaum's the only holdover from a year ago. And they're starting rookies and all other, new guys into the building, some guys who have been there who are stepping up now. I mean, it's just a lot. It's a lot. Like, I also, again, I said this about Miami, about like seeing the movie. How many times do I have to watch Baltimore do this before it's like, yeah, you know what? I'm kind of good. Like all this talk about, Lamar Jackson and some of these quotes this past week about, making him the best quarterback to ever play. Like, no offense to Lamar Jackson. That's not happening. I mean, he's a terrific player, but like think about how last season ended for the Ravens. And it's a weird thing to kind of to knock a team that I have 6th in the league. But like last year, they lost in the AFC Championship game. And the refrain coming out of that game, and I think correctly, was they abandoned the run. That's who they are. Why'd they put it in Lamar's hands? They should run. Well, then you can't sit there and say Lamar is the best quarterback in football. There's not a Chiefs fan alive who, when they lose a game, goes, man, if I could only run it more. Like, you're like, give him the ball and get the hell out of the way. Like, the Bengals. Nobody's like, man, if they just give him the ball to Joe Mixon more, Yeah. Nobody's sitting there saying that. Buffalo, to an extent, you say only because they need more balance, but like, nobody's like, take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands. That was the refrain coming out of that game. It was like, well, why did they just throw the ball? Well, if he's a great player, shouldn't they be doing that? And now, for the record, I think he is a great player. I do not think he's a great thrower of the football. Yeah. I think he's a good thrower of the football, but I don't think he's a great thrower of the football. I think he's a great overall player because of the dual threat that he represents. And I think he should have won the MVP last year. And I think he obviously should have won the one he had in 2019. But I look at the Ravens and say, yeah, great, you can run the ball. Like the Derrick Henry signing's great. I was never concerned about you running the football. That's not the problem. The problem is if you double cover Zay Flowers, like you can't throw the ball. That's the problem. And I think the defense this year, I think will be fine. I think it's going to take a significant step back. So I still think they're good. I still think they're a playoff team. I still think they're a pain in the ass to play. But I don't think they are an upper crust AFC team like they were a year ago.
And all of that is why I have them at 10, because when they get into the playoffs, they don't scare me, man. Like Lamar's biggest win of his career was probably this past season against Houston. And that team fielded a rookie quarterback, albeit a very good rookie quarterback, but a team that was missing Tank Dell. And once you put the brackets on Nico Collins, they couldn't throw the ball. Like no one was looking at the game against Houston saying, oh yeah, Lamar is the reason that they won. Like no, the defense beat the hell out of a rookie quarterback and they couldn't throw the ball because he didn't have anybody to turn to. So I don't know, man, he's 2-4 in the playoffs now. They haven't won a playoff game in his career in which the opponent has scored more than 13 points. Like, I don't know, man. I think that they're a very good regular season team, but they aren't in that echelon of AFC teams where I'm scared of them winning the Super Bowl.
Not to repeat myself or to repeat the points you just made, but yeah, I mean, at some juncture here, tell me why it's different.
Yeah.
Why is this year different? I would challenge anybody who's a big Ravens believer to tell why is this different? Why is this team better equipped to go to the Super Bowl? I have no idea what the answer to that would be.
I think last year is probably going to be their best shot for a while because that defense was ungodly good.
Yeah.
And, we already pointed to the pieces that they lost.
And it was a year where the AFC was not what everybody thought it was going to be. Rodgers got hurt.
Yeah.
Lawrence got hurt. Herbert got hurt. The Bills, the first half of the year, stunk. The Chiefs were a tire fire offensively. Like, Stroud is great, but as you mentioned, was a rookie, and that team was kind of getting its feet wet. All these things conspired to help you out. You're the number one seed, all of that. You're healthy as can be, and you get beat in the AFC title game. And like, I won't say soundly, but like, you never had the ball with a chance to tie the game in the second half. Like you weren't that close either. So it's, I agree. I think Baltimore at this point, they're very good, but they're not. There's no reason to think that all of a sudden they're going to be different than they've been. Why? Why would they be?
All right. Moving on to number 5. This is where I put the Bills, probably a little bit higher than most will.
Go ahead. Tell me why Josh Allen's going to make him win 17 games this year.
Thank you. So in all reality, though, I think that the Bills, and I did a very long piece about this for the Sporting News. Go read that if you haven't read it yet. I think that they're just taking a page out of the Chiefs playbook from a couple years ago, where they are becoming more of an efficient offense rather than a bombs away type offense. And if you look at a lot of Allen's picks last year, especially in the first half of the year, they were on throws of 20 or more yards downfield where they just weren't taking the easy layups. They weren't taking the free throws. They were taking half court shots when they did not need to. Once Joe Brady took over, they leaned more into the run game and James Cook. And I think that's what we're going to see a lot more this year is a lot more just, death by 1,000 cuts rather than a shotgun blast to the dome. So I think that they're going to be more efficient offensively, getting Matt Milano back, who missed practically all of last year after getting hurt in London against the Jaguars. Terrell Bernard coming back, who didn't play in the playoff game against Kansas City. They have a solid secondary. Obviously, no more Tre'Davious White, but he was constantly hurt the past 2 years. Russell Douglas played really well last year. Christian Benford stepped into his role very well. Taron Johnson's one of the better nickels in football. So I don't have too many worries about their defense in the regular season. But like you said earlier, when they get into the playoffs, that's when I start worrying because they have constantly crapped the bed in the biggest games. So I think they're going to win the AFC East again. I think they'll get to at least the divisional round. They'll probably win a playoff game. It just comes down to, okay, can this defense step up in conjunction with the offense and get the job done? So still obviously question marks about the receiver position. I'd say, though, in terms of like overall depth, I think they're deeper at that position than they were last year. Obviously, losing Diggs isn't, what's the word I'm looking for? Not what you want, but I think Coleman's going to be fine. Curtis Samuel back-to-back 60-catch guy. Not an A, but, a B minus. So I think, like I said, they're leaning more into similar to what the Chiefs did in 2022 once they traded away Tyreek Hill. Just becoming more of an efficient offense rather than a bombs away, explosive play all the time offense.
So I think that's well said. I did a piece for Sports Illustrated where actually the two pieces. I predicted my all-pro teams for this year, and then I also did one where I did that without being able to use anybody who's ever made an all-pro team. And in both cases, I had James Cook as my all-pro running back.
He's quietly very good last year.
So I went back and looked. Before Brady became the OC, he averaged 12 carries a game. After, he averaged 16.9.
Yep.
They ran the ball effectively and a lot more. And I think they're going to have to do that this year. And I think they're built to do it. Can they? Now, I think that will help them at times. I also think that it's going to make them have to play differently across the board. And it's going to force them to have to do some things they may not be comfortable with. And to your point, like, there is truth in that with the Chiefs. Like, they did do that. I would also point out that the reason the Chiefs won the 2022 Super Bowl against Philadelphia was because they had one of the best draft classes in the history of the franchise. I mean, they drafted Karlaftis and McDuffie and Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams and Brian Cook and Leo Chenal and Isaiah Pacheco in 1 year. And the year prior to that, drafted Trey Smith and Nick Bolton and Creed Humphrey. And didn't have a first-round pick to do it with.
Yeah.
Like, so if the Bills can draft really well, that's going to be the key for them. Now, my biggest concern with Buffalo, I just don't, like, where's the pass rush coming from? You lost Leonard Floyd. Von Miller is basically me at this point. Like, is it Greg Rousseau? Who is it?
That seems to be who they're kind of. I wonder,
because that's Kansas City has just lit them up like a Christmas tree every year because of that. The Chiefs have been able to block them inside with that trio in the interior. They've been able to single up those edge rushers and go, all right, you can't get to Mahomes. And if you can't do it, you're losing. And that so that would be my concern. But to note here, so number 5 for me is Houston.
Okay.
I have Houston 5. Now, I will say there's a real argument to be made that they're young and it's a year early, but I think Ryans is a good coach. I think Stroud is the closest thing to Mahomes that there is in the sport in terms of the way he plays. They've got weapons everywhere. I mean, people are like, well, Diggs, is he the same? He doesn't have to be. He's just got to be good. Like, they've got Diggs, they've got Collins, they've got Dalton Schultz, they've got Tank Dell. They brought in Mixon. Now, look, I don't love the Mixon thing, but like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
The tackles are very, look, you got Tunzel, right? So you feel good with tackle spots. Interior of the line's got to kind of show it a little bit. Defensively, you bring in Danico Autry, who's one of the most underrated players in the league. And they brought in Danielle Hunter. Now, they lost Grenard. Yeah. Long term, I don't love that swap. But for this year, I think it's good. You pair him with Will Anderson. The biggest question I have with Houston, other than their age, is their secondary. Stingley, I know, is an excellent player. Jalen Petrie is a very nice safety. Those other corners you can throw at relentlessly. And there are going to be teams that just go, look, man, if we can block you, you got a problem. You're going to have to score 35 to beat us because we can just go all day at those other cornerbacks. That's the concern that I have. But I think Houston's terrific. I think they're going to win that division. I think the Texans are a team that, if not this year, next year, I think is going to be knocking on the door for a Super Bowl. I think they're very, very good.
Well, what a coincidence, because I have them number 4. I think that they're that good. I don't think it's a year early to put them in that conversation. I think Stroud, had he not gotten hurt last season, I think would have gotten some MVP votes. Like, just the things that he was able to do, turn them around in 1 year. Getting Tank Dell back, I think that's going to be really big. And then obviously adding Stephon Diggs, where this can kind of allow him to age gracefully into being like a 1B number 2 receiver rather than having to be like the go-to number 1 guy. You mentioned their defense. They're going to really bang on Kamari Lassiter being somebody who is very good right away to put on the other side of Derek Stingley. And if he is, then great. But Steven Nelson retired, so you're really going to have to bank on somebody else to to step up. Yeah, defensively, I just think they're pretty underrated. I like Stingley. I like Petrie. Will Anderson was obviously tremendous, and then bringing in Daniil Hunter to put next to him is great. So love Houston. I think that division is interesting because you could probably make the argument for 2, potentially 3 teams as to why they could win it. Yeah. But just Stroud's incredible. I think that they have the best coach in the division. I like Doug Peterson. I really like Shane Steichen. But as of right now, like Ryan's just showed up and again turning that sinking ship around in 1 year is incredibly impressive. So they're number 4 for me, and would not be surprised if they are a dark horse team to make it to the AFC title game.
Okay, it's fair. My number 4 team is Cincinnati.
Okay,
and I think they are I said earlier, and I'll double down on it. I think they're the only team in the AFC that can beat Kansas City. If they play them heads up, they're the only one. And it's not because of their personnel. It's because they know they can beat them. Mm-hmm. Now, the personnel is not bad either. Burrow, for my money, is the best quarterback in the NFL, not named Mahomes. When he's on the field, to me, I know Bills fans hate when I say that and they scream at me, even though I have Allen third. Like, that's some huge denigration of the guy.
Buddy, you know how much I love Josh Allen, and I don't like. For those people who do put Burrow second, I'm not going to be like, oh, you're like
Burrow.
Okay, that's fair.
Burrow is nowhere near as talented as Allen, but the guy is just a killer in big games. He just is. Like, he just makes plays, and I have a lot of respect for Burrow from the standpoint too. I mean, that guy's gotten the piss beaten out of him, man. Like, they can't block him at all, and he just keeps coming back over and over. Now, he's got to stay healthy. That's a given. And I will say the one caveat with the Bengals this year is that thing could explode. I mean, Higgins wants to be traded. Hendrickson wants to be traded. Jamar Chase just got told by the owner of the team that, hey, basically, buddy, like, sit down and be quiet. We're not going to pay you until at least next offseason. I'm sure that went over really well. They've got questions. Like, they've got real questions. Defensively, I like the front 7. The secondary, especially corner, like you mentioned, the Wuze's gone. They swapped out the safeties. I think they're better at safety. Yeah. But, like, there are question marks. Dax Hill to this point has been a bust. So, like, there are question marks there. But I trust Lou Anarumo. I think he's an excellent coordinator. I think offensively, you still have those 2 guys on the outside and you have Burrow. Now, they don't have Mixon anymore. They don't have Boyd, which I think Boyd's a real loss. I like that kid, Iosefis. I saw him in training camp last year. I remember watching him and being like, this kid's good. Like, I don't know. Yeah. This kid is really good. He's a 6th-round pick out of the Ivy League.
Really good at the Senior Bowl last year as well. And not for nothing, first team all handsome. Just great hair.
I mean, sure, that'll help him pick up 3rd and 8.
It sure will, yeah.
But look, man, I really do think, like, first of all, the other thing that I should mention too, because I think it's a huge point with them, they're playing a last place schedule.
Yeah.
So, like, they have this built-in advantage. Now, doesn't mean it's going to be easy. They still got to play the AFC West, which you could argue how tough that division is. I mean, we have one team, I'm sure, both of us, in the top 10 from that.
You mean Denver's not in your top 3?
They're in the bottom 3. They're in the bottom 1. So, you could argue how tough that is. You got to go to Arrowhead week 2, but they have a last place schedule. So they're getting all these teams that aren't good. I think the Bengals are the biggest threat to the Chiefs. If they don't beat them, look, you'd be a moron to sit here and say, well, Houston couldn't beat them. Buffalo or Baltimore couldn't beat them. I think Cincinnati by a mile is the team that's got the best shot to do it. If they don't do it, I just think if Houston's got to play the Chiefs, they probably got to go to Arrowhead.
Yeah.
And if they got to go to Arrowhead in January, I don't think they're beating them. I don't. I think it's a lot to ask of a young team. And, if they got them in Houston, like, maybe. But, I think the Bengals are the team most equipped because of their history. They have the confidence. They know how to beat them. Where a lot of these teams, like, they go in thinking they can beat them, but that's a whole different deal, a whole different story.
Yeah, and you mentioned the loss of Tyler Boyd. They drafted Jermaine Burton out of Alabama to try and somewhat replenish that. Andre Yoshivas, very good. So, yeah, man, and like you said, there's a sense of, hey, we've done this before. We can certainly do it again with this team. And Burrow's the only active quarterback to say that he's beaten Mahomes in the playoffs. So I'm very intrigued to see what Cincinnati looks like this year. And again, if Burrow stays healthy, I think they're going to be my team to come out of the AFC. Eventually somebody else not named Mahomes is going to win a ring. in that conference. And I would think it would be this year. I mean, we haven't seen a team three-peat before. If any team can do it, it is Kansas City, but we'll touch on that in a minute. Number 3 for me is the Lions. Adding DJ Reader to that defensive line, I think, was very, very good. And then they trade for Carlton Davis and draft Terry and Arnold in the secondary, which was their weak point last year. It was better than it was in 2022, but still not up to par. They had a lot of they signed a lot of guys last year that got hurt. They released Cam Sutton because of everything going on with him this offseason. And he wasn't very good in that system last year to begin with. So replenishing the losses in the secondary, very good. And they keep Ben Johnson for a second straight offseason when nobody really expected them to.
Right.
And if not for a few somewhat boneheaded calls in the NFC title game, they probably make it to the Super Bowl last year. So I think they'll be right back in the mix. That offense is going to be very deadly. They were the definition of just like balanced, deadly. They damn near had 2,000-yard running backs. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is 53 yards away from being a 1,000-yard back, and Goff still threw for 4,600 yards. So that is the standard of just balanced killer attack offensively, and I think they'll be right back in the mix, getting better defensively, and I think they'll be maybe in the NFC title game again, but at the very least making a deep playoff run.
Yeah, so I have the Niners here.
Okay,
3, and I know that they're kind of penciled in for everybody at the top of the NFC. I don't feel that way. I think that they have a lot of guys who are injury risks who, for the most part last year, were able to hold up. I mean, is Bosa giving you another full year? Is Kittle doing it? Is Debo doing it? Is Trent Williams doing it? Is McCaffrey doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Ayuk wants to be traded. I don't think it's possible that Purdy has a better year than he had last year. I don't think it's possible. Like, I think that's maybe the best year of his entire career. The right side of their line
sucks. It's not good.
So, look, now that all said, they're ridiculously talented. And I didn't even mention Greenlaw and Hufanga, who are also coming off injury.
Yeah.
Like, they're in my opinion, deepest roster in the league. Great coach, unless it's a key spot in a playoff game, in which case, it's apparently up for grabs as to whether or not he's going to make the right call or not, even if it's a coin toss. To this day, I believe that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen out this side of Seattle, throwing the ball 1-yard line. Like, those two things, I could live to be 300 and listen to every argument in the world, and I'll never understand the argument the other direction. These analytics nerds who are like, it's just 50-50. No, fuck, it's not. Stop it. Look, but that's it. Like, look, they're loaded. I mean, they have a ton of talent. They've got pass rush. They can cover. They can put their second level's better than anybody in football. I believe wholeheartedly in that group. And then on offense, look, I mean, the offensive line outside of Williams at times is a big question mark, but they've got weapons all over the place. Purdy, I'm not like the biggest Brock Purdy guy in the world, but I think you'd also be foolish to sit here and say he's not a good quarterback. He's a good quarterback.
Yeah.
So I have them at 3.
All right. Well, I have them at 2. I think you can flip-flop the lines on the 49ers, and I wouldn't argue too much. Yeah. I very much agree with you on the fact that this is a team, like when you go back to when Kyle Shanahan took over, it's always seemed to be something with injuries, right? And luckily they evaded that for the most part last year. But even coming into the year, it was, okay, is Brock Purdy healthy after the game against Philadelphia? Like, is his arm going to be okay? And apparently he was still rehabbing it into November last year. So this is a team where, like you said, Debo's dealt with injuries before, Kittle, a ton of guys that are usually good to miss, 4 or 5 games. Like, they got lucky in terms of that regard. I don't know, man. I feel like every year we go into this saying, oh, this is finally going to be the 49ers year to win it. And every year something happens where it's not. They constantly make it to the NFC title game. So would not be shocked in the slightest. Yep. Would not be shocked in the slightest if they get back there. I don't think this is a Super Bowl team, though. Roster-wise, they're very good. But I do think that they also have a lot of decisions to make in the next couple years.
Yes,
like Travarius Ward's going to be a free agent next year. Drake Greenlaw is going to be a free agent. We'll see what happens with Ayuk. And then after that, you got to pay Hufanga. You got to figure out what you're going to pay Purdy. Like, you got a lot of choices that you got to make, and you can't keep everybody.
Yeah,
so,
you're paying Purdy. I mean, you're paying him 55 plus a year. That's your pay.
You think that they're going to give him 55?
They're going to have to.
I think if there's any
what else
team,
are they doing?
I think if they go ahead.
No, I mean, Trevor Lawrence has not had a more successful career than Brock Purdy. In what planet?
But here's the thing with that, man. Like, you can look at the playoff longevity and whatnot, but if you ask me right now who I'm taking, Brock Purdy or Trevor Lawrence, I know who I'm taking, and it's not Brock Purdy.
I agree with you, but that's not the argument we're having.
I do think that if there's one team and one coach that can say, look, man, we love you. We're not giving you $55 million a year. Kyle Shannon's proven, hey, I got that with Jimmy Garoppolo.
If you want to make the argument that they just shouldn't at all pay him, that's fine. I'll hear that. But if they're going to pay him, he's getting $55 million a year. Like, that's going to happen. Because I'll tell you right now, you and I both know Tua is going to get paid before Purdy. And I'm telling you right now, there's not a world. I would take Purdy over Tua.
I agree.
So that's going to be the problem. Like, Tua, and look, I wrote a piece about this in June.
Very good piece, by the way. Go read that.
Thank you. I wrote a piece about him, and I talked to 6 people in the league. I talked to 4 people up in front offices, and I talked to 2 defensive coordinators. And I will say, without giving them away, 2 very, very well-known coordinators who have faced him. Both guys. I left it open-ended. I didn't lead anybody. I just said, hey, look, like, what are your thoughts on Tua? Just give me, like, when you're game planning for him, what are your thoughts? Both guys said to me, yeah, well, if he can't read defenses, like, we're just making him go off his first read. If we can muddy the picture, essentially. I'm trying to find the text right now, actually, so I can read exactly what was said without pulling up the story.
Okay.
But I mean, it was damning. It was pretty damning. Okay, so one guy says to me, try to make him read things. He just throws it to spots a lot of the time. Keep changing the windows on him, and he'll struggle. And that was the kinder of the 2 things that were said to me about him from defensive coordinators. So the other one, best way to look at it, you prepare for the speed at the skill positions, then you prepare for Mike McDaniel, ... then Tua. He doesn't like to get hit or read coverages. When is he at his best? RPOs and quick game. Next question to ask yourself, how many QBs would you take before him? And I, in full disclosure, said I would take him 9th in the AFC.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? And he said, you're not wrong.
I think when I
and that guy's going to get $55 million a year, whether it's from Miami or somebody else. So let me tell you something right now. Purdy is getting $55 million a year plus.
I'll say this. I don't think the Dolphins are going to pay Tua. I think the Raiders will be dumb enough to do it. I think that there will be. That feels like a pretty Raiders signing, right? Like, he was pretty good somewhere else. We'll bring him in and give him a ton of money.
For the record with Tua, I think it's like 50-50 if they sign him. I think they're going to make him play this year out. Yeah. They've got the tag at their disposal. The disposal. I can't say it apparently. The disposal. I'll tell you one thing that nobody's talking about, because in this day and age, for some reason, it's like a taboo thing. Those head injuries are a real thing with him. Like, if you don't think that's part of the conversation in Miami, you're crazy. Like, just because he stayed healthy last year, I mean, God bless him, good for him. But, like, you don't think that factors into them thinking about signing him for 5 years?
Sure.
I mean, of course it does. It has to. So, I mean, he openly talked about the fact. He was like, should I keep playing? That's a real question. That is a real question. So, look, the bottom line for me is with Miami, we're getting off topic here, but like with the Dolphins, it's fine. With the Dolphins, like, I would not pay him. If I'm Mike McDaniel, I'm like, I didn't draft you. I have to prepackage everything to succeed. We have Hill and Waddle, and, like, we still can't score a point against anybody who's worth a damn.
Bro, do you know what his QBR was against the Chiefs in the playoffs?
I don't off the top of my head. Was it less than 10?
It was 15.3.
Okay. I will tell you, going into that game, I try to, like, not always just make it about the Chiefs. Everyone who's listening to this, who's aware of me at all, knows I grew up a Chiefs fan and remain a big Chiefs fan. I am always, despite the fact they're a dynasty, I always am pessimistic and just nervous about them going into games, especially big ones. I have never been more confident in my life in the game that they're going to win that game. I remember saying to anyone who would listen, I'm like, they are going to baptize this team. Like, the weather, you couldn't find a worse situation for the Dolphins. It's frigid, like historically frigid.
Was it like 30 below with wind chill?
Oh, it was brutal. I mean, I had a credential to cover that. I was supposed to cover Sports Illustrated. I couldn't get there.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't get to the stadium. So I had to turn around and cover it from my house. I just remember watching that game and like the first like 2 series and just think this game's over. Like I could turn off this game right now and go to bed. They have no chance. But in any event, I think Purdy's going to get paid. And then I'm assuming that the Commandeer year show, we have the same team at number 1.
Yeah, I mean, when you sign Russell Wilson and trade for Justin Fields, it's hard to not have you at number 1.
Yeah.
Of course. But yes, we know who number 1's going to be. I tell you what, even if the Bills weren't going to take Xavier Worthy, why in God's name are you helping? Why are you helping the Chiefs get somebody that they want? That didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I remember sitting there on draft night, literally just like, what the fuck are you doing, Brandon Beane? And obviously that play in camp went viral with Mahomes running to his left and just launching a missile to Worthy in the end zone. So we'll see how that goes, man. Notable losses. I mean, they trade L'Jarius Sneed. Willie Gay's now in New Orleans. I think. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I think those are the only like 2 like big ones. If I don't think they've lost anybody else like super significant.
Yeah. I mean, Sneed's the big one. Sneed is the big one. Even Willie Gay, like he's a good player, but they have Leo Chenal kind of waiting in the wings behind him. I think he'll be fine. My biggest thing with the Chiefs this year, look, losing Sneed matters. They're going to use McDuffie now more in that role where he's going to play inside and outside, and they're going to rotate in guys. Look, Jalen Watson's been a starter for them, but now you're going to see more Joshua Williams. You're going to see. Remember this name. You're going to see a lot more Shamari Connor playing all over the field. That kid is a really good young player. Like last year, everybody talked about Rashee Rice for their draft class, and like understandably so. That kid is going to be every bit as good as Rice is as a slot corner and a safety. They move him all over the field. He's going to play a lot of slot for them. He's going to play some safety for them. They love him because he can do a lot of things and he can blitz, which Spagnuolo loves. But look, I think they're going to have to kind of make up for Sneed. I think they will feel his loss. I also think that because of the depth they have there and Dave Merritt as their secondary coach, I think they'll be all right. My biggest hot take prediction with them is I think they're going to lead the league in sacks. The last 2 years, they've been number 2. I think they're going to have like 65 sacks as a team. This team, you have Jones, who, even though he's 30 years old, I would argue right now is the best he's ever been in his career. They have Karlaftis, who had 10.5 sacks last year, who's only getting better. They have a Menahu who last year missed the first 6 games of the year due to a suspension. After that, it was averaging almost a sack a game. They have Mike Dana who can give you a sack at just about any time. And Menahu and Dana can both play inside and outside. Jones can play outside on third down. They blitz like crazy. They have Tranquil behind that line. Tranquil is good for 4 to 5 sacks most years, even dating back to his years with the Chargers. And then they have FAU. They have Anadike Uzama, who was the first-round pick last year, who they went into the year kind of saying, like, look, this kid's going to basically watch for a year. He's worked with Tom Baldwin all offseason. They're going to move him in more into a regular role. And when he played last year, he averaged more quarterback hits per snap than anybody else in the team, not named Chris Jones. Like, so I think like they have a wealth of talent up front, and that doesn't even get into the offense, which then has when they're in 11 personnel this year, it's going to be Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce, and Isaiah Pacheco, with an interior of Tooney, Humphrey, Smith, and Mahomes behind it. They're pretty good.
Do you have any questions about Wanya Morris at left tackle this year?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I was just going to say, I think the one question with them are their tackles. Like Jawan Taylor last year was a disaster early. Now, the back half of the year, he cleaned up a lot of what was going on. He still wasn't great. Don't get me wrong. Like by no means. Yeah. But he was an adequate right tackle last year by the end of the season. The first half of the year was one of the most brutal 8-game stretches I've ever seen from a right tackle. And quite honestly, not so much because of his play, it was because of the penalties. Like it wasn't even so much like, oh, he's getting beat like a drum. He really wasn't, but it was constant penalties. He had 5 penalties in the second half against Jacksonville. They sat him in the second half of that game. It was unbelievable. But the back half of the year, he played better. I think they'll be okay there, even if they got to chip every once in a while. On left tackle, Wanya Morris and Kingsley Suamataia, who they took in the second round out of BYU. That's the camp battle to watch. Mm-hmm. That's the position to watch. Morris has been getting more snaps than Suamataia early. I expect that to be a rotation. But yeah, I think, look, there's also their break glass in case of emergency thing, which is Donovan Smith. Like, if they have to, they'll sign him. And Donovan Smith last year was average. Like, he wasn't great. He wasn't bad. But yeah, I think the way they'll do it is they'll just leave everybody singled up inside and they'll fan out and they'll help those tackles if they have to. That is my biggest concern with them. I'm going to be honest. That is my only concern with that team. That's it. I think the defense is a top 5 defense, even without Snead. The special teams, you still have Butker. You have Ariza now, who comes back after all those allegations and everything else. He's now the punter. Townsend's in Houston. The coaching staff's ridiculous. And Spagnuolo is the best defense coordinator in football, and you have him. If that team's healthy, it's going to win 13, 14 games. It's just, and their schedule's a joke. They play the AFC West and the AFC South. So, yeah, pencil me in for like 14 wins.
Yeah, and I wrote about it. I wrote about their season a year ago, about a week ago for Sporting News, and it's just like, even if they kind of thank you, man, appreciate that. Even if they sleepwalk through the year, man, like they've shown that they can just flip a switch in like week 18 and be like, all right, I guess it's time. Our actual season starts now. We'll play. It's insane just how all of them, 53 men in unison, just went, all right, let's do this.
I think maybe this is the Chiefs fan in me. Like, maybe most people wouldn't even remember this. The defining moment of last season had nothing to do with the playoffs. It was their game against the Raiders on Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
That game, I remember talking with a lot of people in the building after that game. That game was so humiliating to them that it made them change. It made them literally rip most of their playbook out and just say, we're going to go to the basics. I mean, they won the Super Bowl just with their basic vanilla offense. That's what they did. It helped them. They could not stop taking dumb penalties on offense last year, like pre-snap stuff.
Yeah.
They did not have, after doing it, I mean, so everybody remembers the Kadarius Toney, like, offsides.
Buffalo.
What people don't remember, they did it again the following week. They did it again. People don't remember that because, like, it didn't matter that much. MVS did it the following week.
That's hilarious.
So, like, they were a disaster all year. They couldn't get to the line of scrimmage on time. They couldn't. I mean, it was the worst operation I've ever seen in terms of for a good team. I mean, I'm not talking about like Nat Hackett's Broncos.
Sure.
Okay. They got to the playoffs. They did not take one pre-snap penalty in those 4 games.
Jesus.
I mean, that, and to me, that is the example of what you're talking about. Of like, we are going to lock in and we are going to kick your ass. Like, here it comes, beat us. I remember talking to people, like, there were a lot of people around, and I won't say like in the team, because I think that'd be disingenuous, but around the organization, felt like they beat Buffalo, they're going to go to the Super Bowl. That was the thing. I mean, I think a lot of people felt like,
I think that was like the de facto AFC Championship game.
I just think, and I know it's weird because if you go back and look, a lot of people felt like nationally, like in our seats, felt like, well, they might beat the Bills and the Bills are beat up and they beat them in the playoffs, but like the Ravens, they have no shot at beating the Ravens. And
I was not one of those. I think you and I were both pretty much on the same page when it came to that. We were.
And I remember saying to anyone who would listen, if they beat the Bills, they're going to the Super Bowl because they're not losing to Baltimore because they match up with them. And I think a lot of people felt like, well, how do they match up? Like, they're not great against the run. If you know anything about Steve Spagnuolo, they were not going to let them run the football. I knew what they would do. They did exactly what I thought they'd do. They'd single those receivers up with Steve McDuffie and say, you can't throw the ball against us. And we're going to put 9 guys down in the box. Good luck. Have fun. They did something in that game I've never seen a team do before. They, on passing downs with Lamar, had 2 spies. They put one over each guard and said, you are not going to get out of the pocket. We don't care. We'll take 2 guys out of coverage. We have no fear of you throwing the ball. And Justin Reed talked about it on the Greenlight podcast with Chris Long during the offseason.
Podcast.
He said they were praying for them to throw the football. You could tell, I mean, you could just see it. The Chiefs put 1 million guys in the box and said, fine, go ahead, do it. Do it. It reminds me of other stories I've heard through the years where teams have just basically said, like, look, go ahead, take a chance, do whatever you want to do. So I think the Chiefs, the vulnerabilities are, they've played a lot of extra games the last couple of years. And, does that wear them down? I'll tell you and your audience on, I don't know the exact date, in the August edition of Sports Illustrated that's coming out. It is our NFL preview. and I was charged with writing a feature. And I guess unsurprisingly, they were like, "Why don't you write about the Chiefs thing?" I'm like, okay. So I wrote about. They wanted me to write about the three-peat and why it hasn't happened, and what have been the lessons that have been learned. I talked to Rocky Blyer. I talked to Joe Green. I talked to Brent Jones, Darren Woodson, Dave Robinson of the Packers, who actually did win 3 in a row in the 60s, but one was before the Super Bowl. And I also talked to Bill Cartwright of the Bulls, who won 3 championships.
That's tremendous. Bill Cartwright. What a shout.
Because I want, like, look, man, you've done it in the modern era. Like, how? You didn't win it in the NFL, but, like, how? And I'll let people read it, but the general idea, from the NFL players was, look, the hardest part, man, is you have just got to deal with the attrition. Like, that is the hardest part of it. And I wonder, the Chiefs in the regular season, are they going to play guys 10% less of the snaps than they normally do? Are they going to roll that stuff back? I would if I were them. Like, I would go into games against like Carolina and the Broncos and the Raiders and be like, you know what? Going to kick their ass anyway. Like, Travis Kelce's playing 50% of the snaps. And if they play a game late in the year, like, and so in fact, like week 16, they play Houston at home. It's a Saturday game. It's December 21st. If they don't necessarily need that game, I wouldn't show Houston anything. I'd play nobody. I would play nobody in that game. I mean, obviously, you're going to play your stars, but I just mean, like, I would play guys 40 and 50%, like Travis Kelce and Chris Jones. Fine, we'll see you in January.
How many times have you and I talked about that the past couple of years, though? Like when they played Cincinnati a couple years ago in Cincinnati, where they played just the most vanilla, basic-ass defense for 4 quarters. And then once they played them in the title game, they were deadly. They did it against Philadelphia, too, where it's just like, okay, yeah, I mean, if we win, great. If not, whatever. That's
what they've done for a long time. And they'll do it again. I mean, every year when they play the Bills in the regular season, they don't do anything.
That's why I'm so tired of getting my hopes up for my. They
just don't care. Like, they will play. I guarantee you, when they play the Bills this year, they'll just sit in too high. Mm-hmm. And that's all they'll do. And they'll just sit in, and they'll take every little bit of data they can get. And if they see him in the playoffs, okay. Now, to be fair, Allen has been in 2 of the 3 games against the Chiefs in the playoffs. He's played well.
Played ungodly well.
I mean, the 13 seconds game, there's nothing he could possibly have done. There's nothing he could have done.
Yeah.
The first AFC title game, like, look, okay, that was the one game that they didn't play well as a team. They got smoked. Last year, it was weird. Like, Allen, I thought, played well. I mean, listen, if there's a defining moment of the Bills outside of that 13 seconds game, it's probably that ball going through Diggs' hands. Like, I'll be the first to say that's one of the greatest balls I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, that was good coverage. Like, he was on him, and it just didn't matter, and Diggs dropped it. But yeah, they'll sit there and they'll do that, and they're going to make everybody earn it. And if they're healthy, let's face it, if they're healthy, they're going to be in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah.
And it's going to come down to who faces them, how do you match up, and what do you have? I mean, that's going to be it. That's going to be what it is if the Chiefs are, a healthy team throughout the season.
Tremendous stuff all around. When did you say that the piece about the 3P was coming out?
It's going to be in August. It's going to be in the magazine. It'll also go online. I would say mid-August.
Okay. When who are you visiting on your camp tour?
Packers, Vikings, Chiefs, Lions, Bengals, Colts / Cardinals. It's a joint practice.
Okay.
And then Bears / Bengals. I'll see the Bengals again. So I'm going to 7 camps. I'll see 8 teams. I'll see the Bengals twice. Mm-hmm. And that camp tour starts on July 30th in Green Bay.
Lovely stuff all around. By the way, thank you for everybody for listening. Last week had the highest downloads in a day. I think we had like 400 in a day. That was pretty cool. So appreciate that. Yeah, it was very, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, affirming, I guess. Maybe that's not the right, whatever it is. I appreciate the folks listening and watching, however you do it. And I appreciate you, Matt Verderame. What else do you have coming down the pipe on the Sports Illustrated docket?
Really not. I mean, it's mostly just going to be a training camp stuff. So I'll have a training camp report every place I go to. And then last year we did a feature for every place. I think this year what we're going to do is I am going to interview somebody one-on-one after every practice. Mm-hmm. Mostly star players and the one coach. And then what I'll do at the end of that is I'm going to compile it all into about a 3,000-word story. And it's like, here's what I learned on my camp tour in the words of these guys. Mm. So hopefully people read that and they enjoy it. And I'll tweet it out a bunch. You can follow me on Twitter where I'm constantly at, unfortunately.
I will be at Steelers camp at least one day, a little bit less than last year, which I'm kind of upset about, but not a whole lot you can do about that. So I'll be there at least one day. We'll see if I figure out something else. But in terms of that, that's where I will be. Trying to think of any other like big stuff I have coming. I'm doing a piece on the Cowboys, predicting what the next calendar year will hold for them. So that will be fun. Figuring out who they're going to pay, who they're not going to pay, who's going to be under center at this point next year. So that'll be coming in the next coming days on Sporting News. And yeah, follow me on Twitter at JBaileyNFL. Appreciate everybody watching, listening, however you're making us part of your day. This is the Pump Fake. We will see you soon as we gear toward the NFL Hall of Fame game and the preseason coming back. Appreciate y'all. Take care.